I helped get David Soros elected district attorney in Albany, New York. I wonder if anyone has contacted him about the. It seems to me that having talked with him during the campaign, that he might be sympathetic.
Well, we're looking for people. I mean, until somebody actually absolutely confirms, and you know, we got a few irons in the fire here and there, but we're still looking. And in fact, I have a website, peoplevbush.com, and it has links. It has links to my campaign website, and on that website, I have a list of frequently asked questions pertaining to how do you prosecute a president, and it lets the average citizen know, well, what's needed. If you wanted to go to your local district attorney, for instance, or state's attorney, what should you arm yourself with to convince this person that there's a case here? And I go through all the different things. So the bottom line is you need someone who's died in the district, in the war in Iraq. That's a fundamental. You have to have a victim. And then it's preferable if there were family members that would have a stronger impact on a potential prosecutor, but it's not essential. And then you arm yourself with the legal arguments, which I've laid out today, and they're all in the book, and they're also on my frequently asked questions. And, you know, put a state's attorney's feet to the fire and say, look, we can't go on like this, and see what happens. So.
But when I read the book, I thought, well, fine, we should prosecute him for murder, but why not do both, war crimes and murder?
And you can, and that's one area where my book is different than Bugliosi's book, because Bugliosi's book focuses entirely and solely on murder, whereas my book, I just being out there and talking to people and pursuing these issues of accountability, it was clear to me that war crimes is very serious. It's a very serious crime. And the fact that ever since Abu Ghraib, it's really dreadfully tarnished our reputation around the world. But no one's been held to account except a few lower level, Sergeant Karpinski or whatever, a few low level people who were carrying out a policy that was set at the highest level. And we do need to hold them accountable, number one. And number two, I can certainly justify it in my mind because, as I explained earlier, I tie in the torture with getting false confessions that further develop the pretext for going into an illegal war in Iraq. So I find that I've folded in the war crime charge with the murder charge. So if I had my druthers, the perpetrators would be on trial for both.
You emphasize that we're not signatories to the International Criminal Court, but I studied law in 5 European countries, and I don't think that's as important as you seem to think it is. That in the law that, for instance, I don't think Hitler signed anything saying that he could be prosecuted at Nuremberg, but nevertheless, the Nuremberg trials were conducted.
That's true. But that was just done, look, we were the victors, right? And when you're the victors, sometimes you can set up a set of ground rules that worked for you. And it certainly worked for our side. We did put them on trial for war crimes. And so what came out of that were called the Nuremberg Principles. And in fact, I'm part of a group. We call ourselves the Justice Robert Jackson Steering Committee. And Justice Robert Jackson was the lead prosecutor at the Nuremberg trials. And one of the things that he said in his opening statement is that, that all of us, the day may come when all of us have to be held to account, not just the vanquished. This applies to all of us. The thing is that the Nuremberg Principles have their principles, and I don't believe that they are sort of set in stone in terms of having the same weight as what now is considered the ICC, the International Criminal Court. But there's also, and for instance, and there are rules, there are set rules. For instance, the crime of aggression, right? That was tried in Nuremberg. But the ICC has not yet recognized what are the elements of the crime of aggression that you have to show in order to prosecute. And in fact, there's going to be a conference this summer precisely on this. They are going to finally deal with it. They felt it was like so controversial and so broad that no one could really apply themselves. So there's that. But then there's also something called the doctrine of universal jurisdiction, which holds that if a heinous crime is committed and the country that is responsible does not follow it up, then another nation can pursue the prosecution, and that's what's happening with the Spanish investigating the Bush's lawyers and Bush and Cheney. We've got two prosecutors on the case, and when the Bush administration came in, one of them his name is Baltasar Garzón, and he was the guy that indicted Pinochet. So he's famous. He's like a hero. He's a folk hero in Spain. And he and another lawyer, prosecutor, are actively on this case. They have the right, because Spanish citizens were tortured in Guantanamo, and our country has yet to hold anyone accountable for the torturing that went on in Guantanamo. And in fact, under the Obama administration, there have been some civil lawsuits that have been dismissed by the arguments of the Obama Justice Department, which is very unfortunate, actually. So Obama is carrying on some of the methods, legal and otherwise, of the Bush administration. But nonetheless, if Attorney General Eric Holder has appointed a special prosecutor to look into some of the actions of the CIA, who were the people that were doing this horrific torturing against the law. And will he expand his investigation to higher ups? There's a huge amount of pressure on him and Obama not to. But if they don't, the Spanish will. One of the reasons you can exercise jurisdiction is if the home state doesn't do it, then another state that has victims, citizens who are victimized, can. So we'll wait. We'll see. It's not the end. Sometimes I would get very discouraged, and I write about this in the book. I'll always remember the day in May where the New York Times reported that it was highly unlikely that Bush's lawyers in the Department of Justice were not going to be prosecuted. Because when the torture memos came out in April 2009, it caused a hue and cry, just like the Abu Ghraib pictures did. Then the release of these memos, which showed the degree of how these lawyers made something that was really illegal, how they did it, how they justified waterboarding, had people very upset, and even had the New York Times wondering if they could be prosecuted, the lawyers. And then in May, something came out and said they're not going to be prosecuted, and I was feeling like really down. And I happened that very day to run into a very famous international human rights lawyer named Philippe Sands, who had been involved in the whole Pinochet efforts to prosecute him, to extradite him to Spain, and so on. And he was just like, look, the torture memos have been released. That in itself was huge. That's one thing Obama did. He and I'm sure he was severely criticized for doing it. And as you know, later on, he would not release torture photos. He just released torture memos. But the cat's out of the bag. And he said, look, you got to take the long run. You got to look at this historically. We've come a long way. And now autocrats and dictators and torturers know that the human community is looking at them. So that's how we got to look at this. This may be a step. Maybe it won't happen in my lifetime. Maybe it will. Part of it depends on the will of the people. And one of the things that we found out in the campaign is that after Obama was elected, he put up a website and asked people what was their top wish list. And the number one issue on that list was to prosecute the Bush and Cheney criminals, to investigate and possibly criminally prosecute. And I think that came as a shock to them. I think they didn't realize that there was such an intensity of feeling.